we've got a very exciting panel discussion coming up next, and it's titled Sustainability and Finance, Stronger Together. And I will not go much into it because I know the moderator right here has got it, and she will take us into it. And the panelists are Ms. Reason Nyamambi, Head of Distribution from Holland Life, Botswana. Please join us on stage, Ms. Nyamambi. May we please give a round of applause as she joins us. May I also invite all the way from Nigeria, Ms. Bola Atta, Group Director for Corporate Communications for UBA, that's the United Bank for Africa. We welcome you to the cradle of humankind, Ms. Bola Atta. Please join us on stage as well. Thank you very much for joining us at the WSummit 2019. May I also invite Ms. Lynette Armstrong, Acting Managing Director, Botswana. Please join us on stage, Ms. Armstrong. All right. Okay, and the moderator, actually, before we get there, we've got one more panelist, the amazing Miss Lulu Rasebotsa, Managing Director at Liberty Life Botswana. Please join us on stage, Lulu Rasebotsa. And thank you very much for joining us here today at the WSummit. And the moderator for this panel discussion is the amazing Eleni. I know you've got this. CNN Business Africa correspondent. Please take it away, my lady.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, can you imagine? You had this amazing session, and now we're going to talk about sustainable finance. I'm just wondering if we need to pivot slightly on the topic because... Anyway, I mean, what an incredible last hour that we've had, and I surely was moved, and it's incredible because talking about these real issues that influence our daily lives and the power dynamics within our relationships can definitely be taken to even corporate level and in the boardrooms and, of course, in the things that we do every single day. But the reality is that, you know, we can talk about these things at high level, but then we look at the stark realities on the ground. You know, I'm a numbers girl, and I like to look at what the numbers tell us. And I'm going to mention some things, and perhaps it's going to be a bit of a dampener, but I know it's things that you're going to be very passionate about. 700 million people right now in the world are living below the poverty line of $1.90 a day. 2 billion people are currently not having access to the basic things that you and I enjoy, so clean water, the likes of electricity, or even education. And here's a stark number that always moves me. 40% of children under the age of 14, we're talking about 800 million children, still lack basic and full education. So we're going to be talking about sustainable development goals, and I'm sure some of you might have heard about this. It's Agenda 2030. So by 2030, we want to achieve various goals. There are 17 of them, and it's going to be a combination of governments working together with the private sector and, of course, civil society as well. So how do we work together to achieve these goals? And I'd like to also just keep in mind you know, the gender issues that we've been discussing throughout the day. And I'd like to weave some of those themes in. So thank you very much. And I must say, this is only the second time in my entire career that I've had an all-female panel.
Yeah.
Second time. I have been on stage this year doing panel discussions. I think I've done about 20 panel discussions, high-profile panels. And every single year I do a multitude of them, and it's unbelievable that this is only the second time. So I thank you very much, and I'm honored to be on stage with you and share the stage with you. We said that we're going to pivot slightly, only because we've got so many themes to cover. And there was something that we discussed before we heard from Marjorie and Steve Harvey. There was a gentleman in the audience that had asked, you know, what does motherhood mean for a working woman? How does it define her career? Does it hinder a woman from succeeding? And then we had various responses from the audience, from the panel rather. And it was an interesting topic, and it does tend to be something that is on women's minds as we navigate our career, as we engage with our bosses, and it's something that we worry about. At least I do. I have a 2-year-old, by the way, and it's something that I always think about. So I'd like to give it to the experts to answer. And Lulu, I'd like to start with you.
So I guess the question, is this thing on? So I guess the question is, can you do it all? Is it possible?
Yeah.
And I think I'm one who likes to deal with examples, and I use myself as an example. I'm an executive, I'm a mother, and I think I'm not doing a bad job at it at all. And I think in the African context, for the fact that we have a very strong support base, it is possible. It can be done. And I think for those who are upcoming and have aspirations, they should look at people who've done it and just figure out how we did it, ask us, engage us. It is like dancing on a moving carpet, but it can be done.
Yeah. Do you think you should delay motherhood because of a career? Or do you think a career can delay, or do you think children can delay a career?
I think it's a personal choice. So for me, I had my kids much earlier on, and potentially at the time I had my kids, in terms of a leadership role, I wasn't ready, because at a point I think, had I gone into leadership role much earlier, I would have lacked the emotional intelligence and the maturity required to lead. Yeah. So for me, having kids first and then pursuing my career worked perfectly okay. Yeah. But for others, it can be the other way around, and I don't think there's a formula to it.
Got you. Bola, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a mother of 2, and I started quite early. I started my career right out of school, and I got married at the age of 24 and started having children. It has not hindered my career in any way. I know that people like to say sometimes you've got to choose either being at home or having a career. I think you can have it all, actually. I think when you become a mother, you become a lot more focused. It helps you organize your life a lot better. So if you're thinking, I'm going to have a successful career and I can't have children because I'm not going to be able to face the home and face the work space, you just need to organize yourself a lot better. Having children is like having 2 jobs. Some people work 5 jobs. I mean, we're not the only ones who have the children. The men do as well, and they have successful careers. So as far as I'm concerned, being a mother has been a bonus. It's not been a distraction, and thank God it's actually worked out well for me.
Thank you. Reason.
Well, unfortunately for me, I have not birthed, but I am a mother. I think more often than not, we equate motherhood to actually having birth. Yeah. But I'm also a mother. But it is interesting that we talk about motherhood in the workplace while we are talking about sustainable development, because it talks about social inclusion. Yeah. So this boils down to the question of the discriminatory norms that we have culturally and otherwise, to say, how are we including everybody in the workplace, including the challenges of motherhood? And motherhood is there, it's a reality, it's a passage of life that we have to go through, and yet the workplace also calls for what it calls for. So how do we prepare ourselves in the workplace to incorporate the stages of motherhood and everything that a woman has to go through or goes through as a mother?
And you mentioned such an important point, because that is the reality, that it absolutely can influence things, especially for women at the lower end of the spectrum, right? The women that don't have economic opportunity. And part of Sustainable Development Goals is to try and bridge that gap. And I mentioned, I'm not sure if you were in the room earlier, but I mentioned the story of a woman that I met with the baby on her back. And she, the burden of motherhood fell on her. She didn't have any assistance from anyone. Her husband had left her. She landed up having 2 kids to look after and feed. How do we change the story for that woman, Reason?
We can change the story for that woman, because when you look at this woman, look at the responsibilities that she has no choice but to also bear with her. And when we talk about then sustainable development, is what is it that we can do over and above just employing her? What can we do beyond the now that can enable her to then look after this child? So that is why, as organizations, we need to think beyond the person, but into the communities, the societies, and the challenges that we have in the communities.
So it's interesting you say that as well, because this woman was employed on this chili farm. She was earning half what the men were earning because she had to stop to nurse. And they were like, well, you're not as productive as everyone else, so we're giving you half.
Yeah.
And that is the scary part. Anyway, this is just a story, but there's so many like her that I've met. Anyway, so Lynette, what has your experience been?
Well, I think when I think about my mother, she plays a strong leadership role in my life. So I see a mother as being, you know, she represents a society. People look up to a mother. So I don't think it's a matter of choosing whether you want a career, whether you want to be a mother. You've got to make it work. We've all made it work. We've been there. There's people you can lean on. You know, if I think about my workplace and how people look up to me, they see me as a mother. So the skills that I have in being a mother play out throughout the career, in fact, because you're able to lend a hand, you're able to multitask, so it comes out all the time. You can't divorce them.
You become a lot more efficient, don't you, and productive as well.
Yes,
you're like, I could solve this problem. I'm like, I've got a screaming child at home. I know how to deal with this. How do we leverage on those abilities from women in the workplace, instead of seeing it as, well, you know, she's a mother now, so she's not going to be able to be as attentive, or she's, you know, her hormones are going to be all over the place? How do you take away that rhetoric and push it into a positive one?
Well, I think what we do at Dipswana, we are pushing the whole conversation of gender diversity and inclusion. And there's a deliberate effort to say, how do we remove the obstacles for women? So what is blocking them from being at the same pace as men in our industry? So what we've found is we have to make provision for the small things to make it easier. We've taken our employees on what we refer to as an unconscious bias training. So it's just the way that we speak, the things that we say, making men much more aware of their presence and the things that they say. So we have quite a couple of programs on the go, including something as simple as lactating rooms at the operations to make it easier for women so they don't feel the strong urge to have to leave. You know, they can take care of their situation and leave at a later time in the day. So we try and accommodate it.
Lulu, did you want to add something to that?
So I think it's about the fact that as women and women in leadership, remember, Steve just said the men are wired the way they're wired, and we are wired very differently. And we need to push those boundaries. We need to consistently challenge the status quo. I give an example of an employer that I worked for, and their bonus structure was such that if in a calendar year you get pregnant, so maybe say January to September, then you go on maternity leave, your bonus was going to be prorated because you're not there for the balance of the year. But my thing is, if you've been set targets and objectives and you meet them within 9 months, shouldn't you even be overly compensated because you took less time to do what was required of you? So we do need to push the boundaries, the conversations, and it's a whole culture movement.
You say this, and I'm getting emotional about it because it happened to me. And in fact, I had to work even harder to make sure there was enough programming while I was away. So that's the scary part. Bola, you know, and we're looking at this from a sustainable development perspective. And what do institutions within the private sector need to do to at least try and focus on that sustainable development goal, on gender parity, gender equality, equal pay, giving ample maternity leave to women?
I think one of the things we have to make a conscious effort about is starting from the base. So what is it that would hamper achieving the SDGs by 2030? One of those things is, of course, education. We all know, I mean, it's without doubt, especially on the African continent, that the girl child is a bit less privileged in terms of access to education, in terms of training, in terms of just the privileges and opportunities that happen. So for us at the United Bank for Africa, I also run the UBA Foundation. We really focus on the education of the girl child. For the sustainable goals, we're determined to place emphasis on this aspect, to make sure that all across Africa, we operate in 20 countries to make sure that these girls are having opportunities. We give grants, we do competitions so that they can have the chance. We had this young girl recently, which really touched my heart. She won one of our competitions, our grants to go to university. She, very intelligent girl, to study medicine. Nobody in 2 generations had ever been able to do that. So she's going to med school now. What it means is that she's going to lift up her community. Her parents are going to be able to maybe live a much better life. She might educate her siblings, and you know, she's going to go on and do a lot of stuff. So what we need to do with the sustainable goals is to ensure that the community, we need to start from the base. We need to ensure that the communities are well looked after.
Have you guys within UBA or even the foundation looked at certain SDGs and said, this is what we want to focus on and this is what we can achieve?
Absolutely. So we have an area of focus that we call the 3 E's. That is education, it is empowerment, especially female empowerment, and the environment. Now I'll tell you, in terms of the environment, what we realize is businesses are focused on a whole lot of other areas, especially in Africa. This is maybe not the case in the Western world. In Africa, we don't really consider some of the environmental issues that are happening and affecting us in terms of sustainability. Yeah. So we are growing gardens. It might seem like a little thing, but we're growing gardens in major cities where we operate. What we want to do is have people, you know, think green. You know, it's very important. We don't realize what is going on. I mean, I come from a country where there is a lot of pollution because the infrastructure is not good enough to have constant electricity supply. So we have generators. What do these generators do? They emit fumes constantly. It's not a healthy environment. Yeah. People are breaking down trees, and instead of planting trees, we're polluting the environment a lot more. So for us at UBA, we are focused on that as well. And we're just going to make sure that this whole environmental crusade is something that is achievable and sustainable. Because then you're kind of then going into the conversation of, you know, industrializing, keeping the lights on, using generators versus the environment, climate change, which is obviously a short-term and a long-term investment as well. Yeah. And that's the big dichotomy that occurs on the continent. Like, how do you change that to get everyone on the same page? Because we're reliant on fossil fuels, especially in Nigeria. You wake up to hear, you know, all the generators going in Nigeria. Yeah. It's going to take a long time. One of the things we have to do is, you know, just have more responsible leaders and governments that understand that this is something that needs to be addressed. If we don't have responsible leaders, it may take a lot longer than 2030. But the leaders have to make a conscious effort. It's not about giving gifts. It's not about the little measures that happen for 4 years and then they go and somebody else comes in and, you know, things are not sustained. We need to focus on the governments as well. Thank you. Lynette, De Beers and, of course, Debswana has been so focused on social impact investing and ensuring that, you know, you uplift communities. What are the projects that you've been involved with that have really made a difference, that you can absolutely quantify the impact?
Well, I think I would start by saying that, you know, the partnership between De Beers and the government of the Republic of Botswana is one that the core of sustainability sits right there. For the men and women that work at Debswana, every day when we're at work, we know that our direct effort is around sustainability. So we have schools at our operations, we have hospitals at our operations, we have game parks. There is so much that we do every day that is linked to sustainability. We have water service provision projects. We've just recently started off clinics in the areas that we operate in. There are studies that we're doing on rhino in our game parks. We're protecting certain species. The list really goes on and on. But I think the challenge that we have as Debswana is to say, how do we move away from a set spend per annum? Yeah. And how do we integrate regionally with governments, with other private institutions, to really set the game right across Botswana so that we can bring additional private investment in and really attack the real socio-economic development. That's the next step for us.
And it's interesting because a lot of companies always say, well, this is our spend that we're doing on sustainability and social impact investing and so forth, and it's kind of like tick the box, and some say that's kind of greenwashing. Does it have to be a lot more thoughtful than that? And how are you guys thinking about it differently?
Well, we've just started off a project. It's a regional collaboration project, which is starting off with a bit of research to understand in country what are the real needs of the society in the areas that we operate. Once we have that data, we're going to be able to partner. We're going to go out to other institutions, the banks and the audience, to say, how do we partner with this? So it's not to say, well, we're trying to push sport, or we're trying to push a maternity clinic. We really want to understand from a grassroots perspective what the needs in the country are.
So, Reason, I'm going to give you a number that is very fascinating. The IMF has been talking about $500 billion that is going to be needed in 2030, not leading up to 2030, in 2030, just to try and sort out some of the SDGs. So $500 billion. So you know we need to raise funding for it. And the big question is, who's going to help fund this? Is it governments, private sector, is it stakeholders? Who's going to do it? What do you think as an executive at Hollard with influence? Where do you see it going?
No single person or entity will be able to find this. For this to be achievable, we need the public, the civil, and the private sector to come together. And we need to disseminate the information of really what is sustainable development, such that it becomes part of what is built in each organization's measurable achievements. And each one of us can then play a small role. But what would be important is through the communication and the dissemination of this information and knowing who is doing what, which is one of the challenges that is out there, is the definition of everything, what really comes and falls and makes sustainable development. If we can come up with a way of measuring, defining, then there will be money that will be gravitated towards the achievement of this from the collective.
I get that, right? And yeah. I mean, when you talk about sustainable development financing, look, these projects are high risk. Sometimes they don't have good returns or yields. Yes. How do you get people to even invest in this?
You start with what is the need that is being addressed, and how does those needs meet or compare with what the core business is for each business entity. If you take Hollard, for example, we are in the insurance business, and dignity is really what we are in the business. We are in the business of offering people the dignity at the time when they are at their lowest. That is the bereavement stage, or when they have lost their assets and all that. But then you take it to the next step to say, how can we go towards sustainable development? We then chose women to be our focus area, to say we are going to work with women and empower women. And how do we empower women? We've come up with products and group schemes that speaks to what women need. And in the process, we bring these women together. Not only do they then have the dignity of sending off their loved ones, not only then do they have the ability to sustain their family after a bereavement because of the life cover products, but by bringing the women together, we can create an environment where they become an opportunity for themselves, among themselves. Yeah. By grouping the women together, you create a platform where you can educate them. And through those education and through the interaction, the women are there for one another. You bring out vitality in them, which creates long life. Yeah. And the opportunities, like, I'll take a simple example, like when you have put the women together and one has made a good harvest, for example, like that year they had a good harvest, they have beans. All of a sudden they have a ready market that now they can sell those beans to the other women that are there. So sustainability rolls down from all those little initiatives if you do it with foresight.
So, Lulu, Reason mentioned, making SDGs or sustainable development part of your DNA as a company. Do you think if you have more women at the top, that's more likely to happen?
Possibly.
So women are very well known for making it happen. And I always use the example in the African culture. You hear today that there's been a death in the family or bereavement. Trust me, without the women, there isn't going to be a funeral.
No, yeah,
they
definitely.
will mobilize, and women are like that. But I think in terms of making sure that we achieve these, it's not so much about is it the women or the men. Yeah. It's just about making sure that private entities have got alignment in terms of their core value propositions.
Do you guys think about it right now?
So I'll tell you what we do right now. So we are life underwriter as well.
Yeah.
So core to running a business of life underwriting, you need people who've studied actuarial science. Therefore, we focused on one of the pillars being education, but in particular with a bias towards math, statistics, and science for the girl child. Yeah. As a life insurer, core to what we do is life, and health. Therefore, Liberty, in terms of its property investments, we invest heavily in hospitals. Because then that just means we're talking to what we do anyway, any day. Yeah. So long as there's no alignment, you're going to find you're trying to do too many things at a go. So, for example, if an entity like Botswana, obviously green has got to be big on the agenda. The environment has got to be big on the agenda because mining impacts the environment. So if we take the SDGs and align them to what the business exists for, then I think we're on the way to success.
Thank you.
And the sooner we start, the better.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have much time for this panel, but I want to just get a sense by show of hands, please. How many of you have questions at this stage? And if there aren't any, I'll continue. There's a hand over there. Could we get a microphone to this lady over there, please? In the middle. Please just state your name and where you're from, and please, if we could just have short, sharp questions so we can try and get through as many as possible. Is there a microphone on its way? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Alisa. I'm from Namibia. I have a question to the ladies, and thank you very much for the insight. Talking about the issue of the bonuses being trimmed simply because you went on maternity leave.
Sorry, could you just speak a little bit into the mic? Yeah.
All right.
A little louder? Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to just have a follow-up question around the issue of women having to compromise their bonuses because they had to go on maternity leave. But I think the dynamic that most of us experience as working women, especially high-earning working women, is where you're not paid at all when you're on maternity leave. So I wanted to hear the experience of the ladies on the panel, how they handle that from a corporate perspective, because I believe that to enable women to thrive in the workplace is also to be able to support their family. But more and more in Africa, we're experiencing corporates who are actually resistant to pay the basic salary when the woman goes and have a baby. And I've personally experienced that. So I just want to know what the practice is there and whether we as women who are leading corporates are actually doing something about it. Thank you.
Did you catch that? I think it's got to do with female pay, yeah? I'm just going to repeat it and you can just nod. So it's got to do with equal pay, essentially, and women not getting a fair market price, related price. Is that correct?
More when they go on maternity leave.
Sure, I can't hear.
So I don't know how it works in Botswana, but in Namibia, the law is very silent. When a woman goes and delivers a baby, you have to go to the Social Security, which has a ceiling of how much you should get. So I don't know here whether women actually do get paid on maternity leave.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Did you all hear that question? Could someone come and tell me what it is? In my ear. Could you tell me, Michelle, did you hear? Didn't you hear?
I think the question is, do women get paid?
Paid, that's what it's got to do with pay, and women getting paid a fair price, and I think it's also got to do with when you become a mother. It just complicates things. Lynette, do you want to take that?
No, if I heard correctly, the question is, do women get paid whilst being on maternity leave?
Oh, so maternity pay.
Yes.
Such a good question. Because a lot of women need to fight for that, and there isn't actually minimum law. That, a lot of African countries that requires women to get paid maternity pay. So what is the deal with your companies? Time to.
We certainly do. We have paternity as well.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do we.
100%.
100%. How many weeks? How many weeks?
Well, just a week for the men.
A week for the men and for the women?
The women have 4 months. 4 months
4
paid
months.
maternity leave.
Can I apply for a job at UBA? Fantastic.
We do as well.
Fantastic.
2
That's
weeks
really good.
paternity and the 3 months.
If we don't get women paid maternity, it complicates things. How do we get governments to start putting in laws to ensure that women are required to be paid for the time that they take off?
So I think there's been a lot of talk about early childhood development.
Yeah.
And for so long as governments understand that if a woman is not financially capable, the child is going to be compromised.
Absolutely.
Because bringing up a child requires a whole host of things, including caregiving, the food, all sorts of things, the stimulation of the mind at a very early childhood.
And these children are going to be the leaders of the next generation, right? Any more questions from the audience? I can take a couple more. There we go, over here.
Hello,
Hopefully we can hear you.
Can you hear me? My name is Badso Dambe-Groth, and I'm chairperson of BIHL, which is one of the listed companies on the stock exchange. And to me, a lot of it is to do with the leadership. And I'll use myself as an example. My first pregnancy, I just accepted a job at BIHL, and I thought, I'm not going to get paid. And my boss was a man, and he understood, and he said, don't worry, you'll get your maternity benefits. My second child, I had placenta previa, and they wanted me to be bedridden at 3 months, which meant I wouldn't have maternity leave with the child. Once again, it was the leadership, and he was a man. And he said, don't worry, you can work from home. So I think a lot of it, as us women, is we need to make sure we have the right people as leadership for all the policies and things, and influence the men accordingly. And my worst boss, actually, the only female boss I've ever had, she was the worst boss I ever had. So we as women, we need to make sure that we are strong leaders and we influence the policies within the organizations.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic insight. I'm just going to take another question over here, and then we'll do closing remarks. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Boaho Mukomani, and I am a corporate strategy consultant. When we were discussing the issues on sustainability, I thought to myself, the only reason why I am well-versed with the SDGs and all that is because of my job. Because I work with corporates and they want to create strategies that are aligned to the agenda of government and SADC and the UN and all that. But the general Motswana on the streets does not know what the sustainable development goals are. So that means we've got millions of people who don't know how to contribute to the sustainability of their countries and their economies and the environment. So in strategy, we like to say culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and supper. So how then are we going to communicate the SDGs in very simple language that is understood by the general person on the streets so that they know how they contribute to it, because it's a collective effort. We cannot just leave it to the corporate. It needs to be cascaded down to the children, to the teens, to the social media influencers, the musicians, the actors, the creatives. So what's the plan?
Thank you. That was a brilliant question. Yes, Reason.
I think you are very right, because on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of work that is going on that is actually adding up to achieving sustainable development. But a lot of people are doing it without even realizing that they're doing it. So when I was looking at the UN SDF report, that's United Nations Sustainable Development Framework report, it says the work is cut out there, but unfortunately the implementation is the challenge.
Yeah.
But if I take what we've just experienced in Botswana around KYC, I think it is possible. If the people that are responsible for that framework can go out there, disseminate the information, make those definitions clear, break it down to a language that everybody can understand. Because when you really look at it, the 17 goals are day-to-day things that we do. It's not that complicated. It's just us being conscious of the fact that we are doing it, and this is the outcome, and this is how we are measuring ourselves. But I think the challenge is for the team, the department that is responsible to disseminate the information and to achieve what KYC has achieved. Nobody in Botswana, for example, doesn't know what KYC is. And it has now become a norm that you know that for every transaction, you have to have your KYCs in place. So I'll challenge those who have the site, those who have the knowledge right now. It doesn't matter, be it government or any organization, even as Hollard, because we are aware of it, we are knowledgeable of it. Start labeling our activities as such. Then the message will go.
Brilliant. Okay, a few more comments, and then we'd like, do you have anything to say on the questions?
So I just wanted to add to what the young lady was saying, and she brought on that element of musicians and people in the art world. And to Reason's point, these things are happening every day. Yeah. It's just that they've been philosophized. So they seem very high level. And because I used to be a radio DJ many years ago, I like to use analogies of music. So when you think back, for those who are old enough in this room, many years ago there was a song, We Are the World. I don't know if you guys remember that song. It was a collaboration of musicians. To a point, that was what these SDGs are talking to. Because it was, we are the world, we are the future. So let's start giving. And this is what the SDGs are. So I think as we communicate and make sure that we drill down so that the larger society understands, we must communicate in a language which resonates with the different people who represent society. Those in the finance world will speak of them in numbers. Those in music, it will resonate through music. But we must make sure that we speak the right language as we communicate.
So this is the thing, implementation, the money, I mean, those are the realities. And I wonder, do you think that we will be able to achieve some of the SDGs by 2030? Let's be realistic here.
I think most certainly. There will be a lot of progress. We might not achieve it 100%, but there will be a lot of progress. I think as communities and governments get together. So my boss, Tony Lumulu, who's the chairman of UBA, he's got this philosophy called Afrocapitalism. And what that means is that government and private sector have to come together. They have to come together to do this job, and together we can drive it. It's everybody's responsibility. So what we do across Africa is to empower even very, very small, medium-scale enterprises. You know, just ensuring that they have the mentoring, that they have the training. It's not just about the money, it's about sustainability, and it's helping them together. Everybody's all hands on deck. So I think I'm optimistic that we will get to a very far place with the SDGs.
Reason?
Certainly, I think it is very, very achievable. And another way of looking at the goals is the 5 Ps, the people, the planet, partnership, peace, and prosperity. I think it's just for each group of individuals or companies, organizations to say, which space do I play in? And then for each one of us to optimize in the spaces or the P that is most relevant to us. And then we are halfway there.
Thank you. Lynette.
Yeah, I think, you know, just listening to Cynthia this morning, there was a strong takeaway for me about being connected, about actually a whole world out there that we can tap into, people in the room here that we can tap into. So I think if we are going to be very serious, we need to take a new move about really forming frameworks and getting people like you and I together and say, well, I'm not going to do it on my own as a Debswana. How do we partner in a very different way? What is the framework that we can put together? Let's bring the banks in. Let's bring the pension funds in. Let's bring the huge volume of unemployed youth in the country together and see what is the opportunity through the sustainable goals, or even tapping into citizen economic empowerment, because there lies another opportunity.
Fantastic. Lulu, do you have something to say?
So certainly, I think we'll get there. And once again, I'll use an example. So there's this whole concept of finance for social impact, through which we will achieve this. When you think about finance, we're always thinking of the bank and funding and who's going to give us the money. And there's a lady who set up an entity in 2002. She's in Tanzania. And I want all these ladies for inspiration to Google. It's called Selfina Microfinancing. Now, Selfina is a cow, it's the name of a cow that her husband left when her husband died. Through Selfina, and her leasing Selfina out to other women, she has since 2002 been able to finance 27,000 women. Awesome. Has created 150,000 jobs, has impacted 250,000 lives, and in that ecosystem, $17 million has actually revolved and evolved. So if a single woman can do this in this number of years, how about you also tap a movement and pursue this? Then you'll be able to do it.
And not knowingly, obviously she didn't really, I'm sure she wasn't thinking about SDGs, she just wanted to have an impact.
Yes.
Ladies, I'm so glad I'm not saying ladies and gentlemen. Ladies. Usually it's lady and gentleman. I'm so privileged and honored to have shared this stage with you and for your incredible insights. And I thank you very much for all the work and effort that you're putting in your respective fields. And I know that every single day you fight not only for women, but for making sure that we live in a better world. So I thank you so much. And I hope that we engage with each other soon again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. We have gone over time a bit, but we are going to get back on track later in the day. From me, thank you very much. It was an honor to be here in Gaborone, and it's so good to be home. So thank you.